direction. It will give you eyes, give you hope, it'll give you perspective. Oh, there are stories to tell, the times we grew and the times we fell. Oh, I've been afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place. Road will lead us to a better place.
My Valley Home with Rachel MacLean is made possible through the generous support of our sponsors, including Deacon Financial Management Group of Scotia Wealth Management.
In this episode, we visit Digby, where Rachel will be performing at the Fisherman's Memorial. We'll learn about the life and times of Maud Lewis and gather around a bonfire for some spooky ghost stories.
Since we have a little bit of time before the show, let's take some time just to go down to that memorial that they have for Maud Lewis. Yeah, I've never actually stopped. I see things as I fly by them to performances or whatever, but it'll be nice to stop. I love this. This is a monument memorial in recognition of Maud Lewis and all of her life, how she lived here. They have a lot of these information panels all around the property, and I'd love to take a look at this, and we're just going to stroll around and see everything. This is a really wonderful place. I heard that there is a replica of Maud Lewis's house up that way, and I think we should go take a peek. We're just up the road from the memorial, and we thought we would skip up this way and see this incredible replica with you, Murray Ross.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, so I've known your whole family for a lot of my life, and it's just interesting. We have the connections, which is really, really nice. So what inspired you to take this on? I mean, this is incredible, looking behind us. This is incredible.
Yes,
What inspired you to start?
Well, Maud, she inspired me, because when I was a child years ago, my aunt and uncle lived across the road from Maud, and I used to go with my parents visiting my relatives, and as a kid played along the roads and stuff, and one day I was out in front of Maud's house playing on the road, and she invited me into her house.
Oh, wow. So you actually have like a personal connection.
Yeah.
Very personal connection.
Yeah. Well, her house always amazed me. All painted up with birds and flowers on, and ours never had nothing on it.
I was going to say no one else would have had that, and no one else would have put that on their
No,
houses.
nobody else did either.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, years later, I said to my family, I'm going to build a replica of Maud's house for us to look at. I wasn't planning on other people coming here and seeing it. I just want to look at it myself, and that's why it's here on my property. Then the local people, the older folks that lived around here that took food to Maud years ago, well, they come see what I did, and they started telling me stories about Maud. After a while, other people from farther away started coming. When other people started coming, I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to open it up to the public, let the people come in, because you can't keep them out, so that was fine with me. Yes.
There's a fascination with Maud, with her story, with her life, and I find it amazing that we would be fascinated by this little unassuming but yet really creative,
Yes.
colorful inside her soul
Yes.
that she needed for that to come out.
Well, if it wasn't for Everett, really, she wouldn't have a little painted house, because after he settled in his house, he started advertising for a housekeeper. Can you imagine you need a housekeeper for a house that size?
Tiny.
I think it was more companionship than anything, you know.
I'm sure it was.
Maud, she had to get married before she could move in the house. That was
It was appropriate in those days. That's
yeah,
what you,
yeah. So anyway, after she got married, she moved in and started beautifying the house up, painting it all up and everything else.
It's awesome.
Well, very shortly after they got married, well, see, Everett at the time, he used to be a fish peddler around here. He used to peddle fish in his Model T Ford, and well, some days Maud would go with her husband when we went peddling fish, and she'd sit in the Model T while he took her paintings and fish from door to door to sell them. And she'd also see different scenes around the countryside here that she'd like to paint. And when she got home from her journey that day, she was sitting in by the window in the little house and with a TV stand in front of her, and she'd visualize in her mind the scene that she'd want to do. Well, Maud, she was mentally sound but physically disabled with her rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
And every time Maud sold a painting, well, Everett kept the money for it.
Yeah.
But Maud, she never painted for the money anyway. She just enjoyed painting.
Right.
Did she paint it pretty well every day? She did.
Well, it was a passion.
Yes.
It was her passion.
Yeah.
She just never, whenever I think of them, I think they never would have had even a clue that they ever would be kind of celebrated,
No.
Maud, celebrated like this as an artist, but just as a person of her life, what
Yeah.
she went through.
Yeah.
Never she would have imagined that.
No.
How many people would you see in the run of a year? What do you think?
I never ever
You don't
counted
even
them,
count,
no.
yeah.
Well, in the wintertime, I read my guest book when I have time and
Right.
stuff, you
So
know.
people
And
who sign
but some
your
people
guest
sign, some people don't. You
Yeah,
know.
nice. It's quite something. I love that you've done
Yeah.
this, but I love too that you can go in and just
Yes.
walk through and really
Yeah.
get a feel for how she would have been living.
Are you home, Maud? No, she must be out with Everett peddling fish and selling her paintings.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
To honor
And
them.
thanks for dropping in for the visit.
Oh, I loved it. It's
Yeah.
nice to connect with you.
Yeah. Well, everybody don't get as much stories, but you.
Oh, I love
get
it.
today,
Thank
but-
you. I'm special. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
In terms of inspiration, you know, I mean, our aunt had heard that my uncle, and they were very young at the time, had learned that my uncle possibly his ship had gone down. I mean, it was just a horrible duration of the time until she found out that that wasn't the case, that he was actually very safe and you know. But those type of ideas, you know, I was always enthralled with the idea of you know, the men going out to sea and the women waiting with the children and maybe them not coming back or some of them not coming back. That just, I think it really, I'm a very sensitive I mean, you know, we've always laughed about that, I'm a very sensitive person anyway, but that really cut me to the core when I would think about those things, and I would feel a lot of emotion with that, and that's never ended. So a lot of the songs that I wrote early on, that's kind of what they had in them, you know, the theme of them.
There was once a girl whose hair was golden as the sun. Her heart was like a flower on a calm and clear blue day. She did love the boy who waved at dusk to her. At dawn he went to sea. His life was with the sea. I am an old woman now, I remember Queen Victoria at a word the nations took to war or put their boats to sea. But she was one of few, and my story's just a simple one. I fear it is too modest for these 1970s. I was a fisherman's child, and when I still was very young, I wed a man whose fishing boat oars went shining in the sun. And I cursed the sea, and I raged against the angry tide to bring that boat home safe again with himself still inside. And I've seen Jesus on the water. He was calling out my name, and I was frightened, and I faltered. But when he called, I came. I bear the brood of kids, and I fed them on my blood and will. I taught them to run screaming, and I taught them to stand still. And my girls moved on, but my boys went to the sea, and yet I wove the lives around me with his hands that weave the nets. And I have seen Jesus on the water. He was calling out my name, and I was frightened, and I faltered. When he called, I came. One day my man washed up, and me praying for him all the time. They brought him to me full of scales. His hair was full of brine, and my two young boys, soon after pulling at the oar, were washed upon the ocean and me raging at the shore. And I've seen Jesus on the water. He was calling out my name, and I was frightened, and I faltered. When he called, I came. I've been fishing on the ocean till my life's one fishing net, and I've been out there on the Black Sea, and some nights I'm still there yet.
The memorial just ended, and it's always such a touching event to come to. The people are just always so glad to come and remember folks that have been lost over the years, the fishermen. So I'm going to go in and get changed because we have a bonfire tonight. Thanks so much, Steve, for meeting us and agreeing to kind of talk and chat about some of your writing and some of the cool things that we may or may not have heard about in the area.
I've been looking forward to it.
But what led you into like the ghost stories and children's books too? I mean, you don't just write adult books, you've written children's as well.
Exactly so, yeah. Let's put it this way, we're right here in Digby, and there's that big old ocean out there. People in Digby, people right across Nova Scotia, because we're all basically living on a coast. I mean, even the people living in central Nova Scotia, they could throw a rock and hit the darn ocean. And when you're living on the ocean, a lot of times you got to deal with the fact that your dad or your uncle or your brother is going to set sail off to go fishing or whatever, and he might not come back. So you got to make friends with the other side. And I think that's what ghost stories is all about. It's making friends with the other side, with the darkness that lies beyond, and saying it need not be so scary. Yeah.
I like that. I like that way of thinking. Make friends with the other side.
Exactly.
That's
so,
very
yeah.
cool.
People begin to think that, you know, because I write these books, that I'm sitting at midnight in some old abandoned house with a Geiger counter in one hand and a jukebox in the other. I don't know. And,
I'll go with you sometime if you ever do that. But yeah.
I said, no, I am the old guy who's sitting by the campfire. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. I believe in the possibility.
Having said that, how about we grab our coats? We'll zip down, see if we can get a fire started, and then you can tell me all about these wonderful, weird and wonderful things.
That sounds dandy to me.
Awesome, thank you.
This next story is called The Tale of the Shimmering Curtains. And you go down to Digby, and back in the day, back in the 1800s, they had many different superstitions. They'd tell you that you shouldn't turn your ship counterclockwise. And you shouldn't carry a pig on the ship. Bring bad wind or bad stink every time. They'll also tell you that you shouldn't spit overboard, or whistle, or blow a flute. Any one of those is guaranteed to create a storm. But the one thing people don't often know is that you will find fear and terror hidden in the fluttering of a curtain and a bit of wet seaweed. Let me tell you this story. A long time ago, there was a young Digby girl named Jenny. Now Jenny, she was young. She was about 15 or 16. She made a living cleaning the fish that the men would bring in from the sea. She was quick with her hand and sharp with a knife. And she knew of the water. She could track the current just by looking at it. She could look up in the sky and tell you if it's going to rain tomorrow or not. She was wise in the ways of the water and the waves. But when she saw this one fella, we'll call him John, Jenny took one look at John, and right off the bat, her heart went ka-thump, and she said, this is the man I will marry. And like I said, she was about 15 or 16, and John was about 17 or 18. But back in those days, romance happened a whole lot quicker. So by the summer, less than half a year had passed, those two were married, living in a little house on the side of the hill overlooking the Digby Gut. And for at least 2 or 3 weeks, they had a happy marriage. But something happened. Jenny got up one morning, looked at her husband and said, you mustn't go out to sea today. And he says, why? The fish are running, there's money to be made. Those bills aren't going to pay for themselves. She says, last night I looked at the bedroom window and the curtains were fluttering even though there wasn't a trace of breeze in the air. And as you know, if a fisherman's wife sees the curtains fluttering in the bedroom when there isn't a breath of wind in the sky, bad luck is going to result. There's a bad wind that's going to blow into your ship and you'll not come home anymore. Well, he coddled her and he cuddled her and he talked to her and he just tried to cheer her up and said, "Listen, my darling, that's just an old superstition. I must go away to the sea." So he wetted on down, got onto the ship, sailed off to go fishing. As she spent that whole day sitting in that bedroom staring at them curtains, watching them tremble. Just like an old man with a shake in his hand. She was watching those curtains sway. There still wasn't a breath of wind out there. If he hadn't had a good oar to row with, he'd never got out to sea. They headed on out, and as she was watching, the curtain started to tremble and tremble and tremble faster and faster till the curtain rod itself fell onto the ground. She knelt down beside it, and the curtain was damp, like there'd been a strong storm blowing against it. And underneath the curtain was a big old handful of kelp, fresh and wet and stinging of the sea. She took the curtains and she folded them up carefully. She carried them down to the dock and she waited there holding these curtains. As the ship come on, the captain climbed out of the ship and walked on over to Jenny and said, "Jenny, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. There was a spar that broke and it struck your husband while he was down on his knees working, and he fell into the water, and the only way we managed to bring him in is he got tangled in the nets. We brung him in." She said, "Well, I have a shroud to wrap him in. I knew you'd be coming this way." That's my story for you.
What a day to spend visiting the Maud Lewis house and then doing one of my favorite things that I do every year, and that's the Fisherman's Memorial. And then to wrap it up with Steve and his incredible stories and his storytelling abilities, and the fire. The fire on the beach is always the best. And it just makes it that much more touching to me because this is my home.